Everyone, never, right? So I thought that I was a failure. I moved from failing to being a failure. Do you see how it's all encompassing? All encompassing, all or nothing thinking. If I could go back and talk to my then self, I would have introduced some moderation. Yes, fact, you failed. But the truth is, you're smart, you're intelligent, you could try again. The fact is, you failed. But the truth is, there are many factors that contributed to fail. The fact is, you failed, but everybody fails. Failure is not a problem. Failure is actually our friend. Failure is our friend. Okay? Failure is our friend. This acronym, failure, friend, analyze, investigate, right? Take a look at things and look deeply at things so you can learn. And when you learn something, it's important that you actually understand it. I ask my kids every time they do something and it upsets me or they drop something, they break something. I ask them, what did you learn? And a lot of times they're just like, nothing. And I'm saying, like, if you don't learn, it's going to happen again. And they've wisened up, so they give me the answer that they think that I want. But do they really understand? Can they apply it in a different situation? That is important. That is important, not just to get information, but to understand it. Can you apply it in one scenario and in the next? Can you manipulate it? That's understanding. And then when you understand something, you can regroup and finally execute. The most successful people fail. They don't quit because they fail. They learn because they fail. I heard somebody say, if you aren't failing in life, you aren't really living. You aren't really trying hard enough. If you try something and you fail, that is actually a good thing. It's going to teach you something. But failure isn't just a matter of thoughts. Okay. I know this. Emotional pain comes along with those thoughts. And everyone I know tries to avoid pain. Everyone I know, but everyone I know still experiences pain. But wherever there is pain, guess what? There is room for compassion. You see, compassion doesn't exist outside of the realm of pain. If there was no pain, there'd be no reason for compassion. Compassion is the perfect blend of sympathy and empathy in action. Okay? That's what compassion is. It's sympathy and empathy in action. You can feel sorry for someone and do nothing, but that's just pity. And a lot of people, they don't want to be pitied. You can feel empathy for someone and still do nothing. You can feel what they feel on some level and not take action. But eventually, guess what? That too turns into depression. When you just take on the pain of the world and the tragedy and you feel it, because a lot of people who are depressed, they feel for other people, but they also feel powerless. They do nothing, but they feel everything. Yes, those are absolutes. They don't do much and they feel way too much. They're not aware that there's always an opportunity. There is always an opportunity to respond to tragedy with compassion, to respond to evil with good, to respond to sadness with comfort, to respond to loneliness with friendship. There's always something we can do. We can always respond to the pain of others in some way, shape, or form. Compassion gives us purpose. Excuse me. Gives us purpose. Purpose for our pain. Compassion gives us direction and empowerment in the midst of challenges and even in the midst of pain. And this is, excuse me, the perfect time for me to have a cough attack. So I'm checking in the chat to see how many people are showing some compassion for me who's dying here. It's a perfect illustration. How many people are like, is this guy gonna be okay? Like in the middle of this, and it's recording. This is going all over the world. If you didn't respond in the chat, if you didn't ask if I was gonna be okay, you miss an opportunity, right? There's always an opportunity, always an opportunity. So, have any of you ever responded, or has someone responded to you with compassion when you're experiencing pain? Believe it or not, some people haven't experienced that. If you have, I want you to think about what difference it made when someone responded to you with compassion. What about being ignored when you're in pain? Because that has an impact too. Has an impact too. Now, I work with people from all walks of life, excuse me, at different ages and stages. And I was working with a senior woman, high profile executive senior woman. And despite her accomplishments, she struggled with what they call, what do they call it again? It's a term they use for it. You know, where you worry that people are going to find out that you're not as good as you think, as they think you are. You guys remember what they call that? You guys paying attention to these terms? Anybody remember? Yeah, right. Yeah, they call it oh, what's it called again? Help me out. Help me out, Saida. What do they call it again? Where uh you worry all the time that people are going to find out that you're not good enough. It's a complex of some sort. You guys remember? You guys hear me? Yes, you can hear me. You guys don't know the term? You've never heard of this before? Ah, it's gonna bother me. It's gonna bother me. It's gonna bother me so much. But I can let it go. It's gonna come back to me. But anyhow, there's this term for it. And yeah, despite how many awards she won throughout her life and how many teams she led to create these wonderful products, traveling the world, doing a great job, she was worried that people would find out that it was just a sham. In her mind, she wasn't good enough. Why? Where did that come from? She was teased mercilessly by her brother as a child. Yes, imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, right? So the fact that she was teased and people knew about this and no one did anything about it through all of her life, it developed a complex for her. She was anxious all the time, didn't think she was good enough because somebody told her her brother, her older brother, was supposed to protect her, love her, take care of her, bullied her. And her parents did nothing about it for one reason or another. It has an impact. It has an impact, right? So, just in case you missed your opportunity to respond to someone else's pain with compassion, it may not be too late to address it. That's one of the reasons why I wrote this book called The Art of a Genuine Apology. The way I see it, there is no expiration date on an apology. It could be 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. You can still acknowledge where you've missed the mark, where you've done something wrong to hurt somebody. I'm a parent and I know all about imperfect parenting. because I'm an imperfect person. And when I mess up, when I do things that are wrong or I hurt my children, it's important for me to acknowledge it and not dismiss it, but to actually effectively address their pain, the pain that I've caused. It's all about taking action to address their pain, the pain that you've caused. And when you get good at that, you can actually help people to address the pain that they've caused in your life. Now, it's it's as you can see, it's an online course now. It's not just a book, it's an online course and it's an Audible course as well, right? There's an audio version on Audible. So be sure to check it out. But the art of a genuine apology is one example of compassion. But there are some others. Give me some examples. Give me some examples from your life or your thoughts about it. What are some examples of compassion? Throw it in the chat. Have some compassion. Let me drink some water. Any ideas? Sympathy? Okay, how would you express that sympathy? How do we change that sympathy into compassion? Give me an expression, an action that you can take. Compassion is not compassion if there is no action. What about sharing a meal with someone? Could that be an act of compassion? Sharing a meal, right? There are many people who don't have food, who don't have shelter, right? Those are examples of showing compassion. Saying something kind, a kind word, right? Complimenting someone, acknowledging when someone does something great. That can be a sign of compassion. Positive language, for sure, especially when somebody is used to hearing negative language. How about helping someone clean up a mess they made? That's having compassion. What about listening? Listening is by far one of the most important life skills and relationship skills we could ever have, ever acquire, ever invest in, ever improve in, because it impacts our mental health. Listening impacts our mental health. How does listening, this act of compassion, impact our mental health? That's a very good question that I'm going to answer right now. One of the things that I've learned about human beings is that we have these needs, these three core needs, I call them. And this idea comes out of, scripture. Um, Thousands of years old, but it's bang on when it talks about these three needs that we have: the need to feel safe, the need to feel significant, and the need to feel strong. Power is strength, love is significance, and soundness of mind is what we know as safety. When we don't have safety, we feel anxious. So here's what's interesting. When we experience pain and we experience challenges, we feel weak. We don't feel empowered. We don't feel strong. What's interesting is when we recognize someone else feeling powerless and we respond to that, do you know what it does to us? It empowers us. It shows us that we have the capacity to impact change in somebody else's life. You can make a difference in somebody's life. When you show compassion, it changes your life. It spikes your happy hormones. When you show care for someone, it makes you feel good. It causes you to know that you actually have purpose and you have a place in this world, even if just for a moment. You feel significant. You feel significant because you are significant. You're acknowledging the significance in somebody else. That matters. It reinforces the idea that there is goodness in the world. There are good people around, and that if you need help at some point, there just might be help for you. Now, these needs for strength and significance, they overlap with safety, they overlap with each other. When we feel insignificant, we feel powerless, we do not feel safe and secure. We feel anxious, we panic on the inside, and we live from that place. In the face of any kind of challenge in the world, when we choose to respond, it empowers us and it builds hope. It's important. It's important to build hope. It's important to express compassion. But let's talk a little bit about what gets in our way, because there are barriers to compassion. There's some barriers. Our past can be a barrier. If we've had experiences of abuse and harsh responses to us as children, like so many people have, it can cause us to think that there is no compassion. It can cause us to think that we're not deserving of compassion. It can cause us to give up on the world. Our past can play a very significant role because we are learning, right? We're learning, we're taking information, and just because you learn something doesn't make that thing true. Our interpretation, the conclusions we come to, that's learning. But just because you come to a conclusion doesn't mean that that conclusion is correct. Again, I failed chemistry and I thought it was because I was unintelligent. I thought I couldn't do it. That's what I learned from that experience. That was my interpretation. But upon reflection, upon maturing and revisiting this, I realized what I had learned wasn't true. So I could learn something greater. Your past doesn't have to determine your future, whether it's your actions or your outlook. You can choose. You can choose. Another barrier is fear. Some people, they fear showing compassion because it makes you vulnerable. It makes you vulnerable. Some people believe they have to be hard. They can't show kindness to anybody. We live in a hard world. It sucks to be you. Yeah, sure, you're in pain. Whatever. Everybody feels pain. Get over it. That's their solution. If you're tough enough, you won't be impacted by pain. So they don't show compassion. It's just not part of the thing that they do. That can be a barrier. What about judgment? Sometimes we judge people. We judge people a lot, if we're honest. Well, I'll speak for myself. I know that I judge people and I get convicted and I realize, you know what? That could be me. Or I don't know everything. I get to be humble and remind myself that I am in no position to judge. Sometimes we blame people for the situations that they find themselves in. We do. We make assumptions. We think we know. If we were in that situation, we do. We don't know what we would do if we're in this situation because we're not. But there is a way out of judgment. It's through understanding, both the comprehension kind of understanding, like getting the facts and understanding, and the compassion side. What must it have been like for them? What might it have been like for them? It moves us out of judgment. Mixed emotions. Sometimes we're flooded with so many emotions that we don't know what to do. Fear, uncertainty, confusion, fatigue, frustration. We can become overloaded with emotions and then incapacitated and we do nothing. Similar to that is compassion fatigue, where you get worn out. This happens to a lot of people who are empathetic and they care. They might be in a helping profession. People are a lot to deal with. Yeah, some personalities very difficult, but some stages of life, dealing with aging parents who are in chronic pain, dealing with children who might have extraordinary needs. But what if you were in a role as a child that involved caring for others? You grew up caring for others, you became a parent caring for others, and now you're caring for it takes a toll. Sometimes that's all you know, and now it's time for you to live and experience certain parts of your life and seasons of your life, and there's no room for that because you're called upon to serve once again. You can experience compassion fatigue that gets in the way of showing compassion. What about resentment? Sometimes people don't meet our expectations. Unmet expectations often turn into resentment. And when there's a lack of forgiveness and resentment, there's going to be no compassion. No compassion. And just in case you haven't experienced some of these things, I want you to be aware that these barriers are experienced by people. We live in a world where people experience pain and they come up against these barriers, right? So there are barriers to compassion, but then there are benefits to compassion. And in case you haven't experienced these benefits personally, like I said before, it's one of the biggest and best parts of the work that I get to do with people. I revisited as I was preparing for our conversation today, I revisited some comments people have shared with me over the years. One teen, he said to me, "Thank you, Coach Drew. You helped me to see there was another room in my mind that I couldn't access." He learned more about himself in our conversations than he had known in his whole life. Why? Because I listened. I listened with empathy. I actually understood what he was talking about. I listened so well that he could understand himself. Someone else said, "You're the best thing I've done for myself." You were there to care, to listen, to guide. It was the shift in my perspective that made the difference. This was a lady who was having problems conceiving. What does listening have to do with that? What does compassion have to do with that? Everything. Everything. I've never been a woman, never will be a woman. I cannot really appreciate exactly what she was going through, but I could show and share compassion and listen in a way where she felt heard. And there's healing in that. A couple months after, during our conversation, when we started having these conversations, she'd been trying for years, by the way. Couple months in, sure enough, she and her husband, they became pregnant. We moved from sorrow to joy. Listening, showing compassion makes a difference. I'll share one more example. A young man was saying he was so angry, he couldn't handle stress. He was unhappy with himself and he was insecure. He said, "I hated myself." And then he said, "I'm not there anymore. I can remember what that was like, but I can't relate. I can't feel it. I wouldn't be where I am and who I am without you." And yes, it feels great, but I know the truth about that. I listened. If there is a skill that you want to learn, okay, that you are open to learning that will make a difference in your relationships, let it be listening. Let it be listening. One of the people I listened to, again, an older man, came into my office and he had a rope in his bag. I didn't know this till sometime after, but that was the day he was going to end his life. He had a rope in his bag. Listening. Listening in a way that helps people see beyond their pain because You show compassion, you step into that, you change the equation. You change the equation of hopelessness by showing compassion. Someone threw in the chat by comforting someone. Yes, showing care, giving comfort. You can make a difference. The truth is, we shape the world we live in every day. Even the small parts that we occupy, they matter. You matter. You never know how your actions will impact someone else. You never know. You never know how your inaction will impact someone, but it does. Every day there are opportunities. Every day there are opportunities. So, how do we build compassion? Believe that it matters. Believe that it makes a difference. Because it's not about the size of the action, it's about the quality of the action. It's about the intention of the heart, the courage to do something, no matter how small. So, my question to you is, can you think of someone you know who's having a challenging situation? What is something that you might be able safely to do? Safety is important. There will be times in our lives where we may choose to put ourselves in a vulnerable position or at risk, because sometimes there is a cost to pay for being compassionate, but not every time. What is something that you might be able to do? And the last thing we'll consider, self-compassion. What about compassion for you? Can you have compassion for yourself? Those same barriers we talked about, yeah, they can apply to us. We can believe the things that have been told to us from our past, the conclusions that we've come to as a result of how people have treated us would cause us to believe that we are not deserving. We are not worthy of compassion. There's a strong link between forgiveness and compassion. We won't get into all of that today, but know that sometimes one of the barriers to compassion for ourselves is forgiveness. We feel so guilty about the things that we've done. Factually, we've done things because everybody who's human has done some things that are wrong and that have hurt other people. But it's not until we forgive ourselves and we really understand what contributed to doing what we did. There's a difference between understanding, right? Seeing the explanation, the contributing factors, and making excuses. The explanation is for you so that you can understand and you can learn, you can regroup, you can do things differently the next time. But part of that understanding leads to compassion for yourself, to know that you are human. You might not have known what you know now. You might have learned things from your parents or things that were done to you and you did them to other people. I hear these stories over and over and over. The road to healing and change is paved with understanding. Many people are waiting for forgiveness from other people when the real battle of forgiveness that they are engaged in is with themselves. You don't need somebody else's forgiveness to heal. For those of you who believe in God, God has already given you forgiveness. But can you forgive yourself? It's important. Forgiveness is an act of compassion for yourself. We already talked about how it's connected to mental health. When you forgive yourself, you show compassion to yourself, you open the door to the rest of your life. You can live freely. You can live fully and freely by showing yourself compassion. So it counts. I really believe it does. So that's all I have to say about that. You know, so many people come up to me when I talk about the book and I share at events, and people say things like, Coach Drew, I wish I had known this 20, 30, 50 years ago when I was parenting. But what can you do now? Can you help me now? Can you? Of course. Of course. Excuse me. I listen to people. I teach people how to listen to others in a way that changes lives. So I'm listening now. This is my favorite part of these presentations. It's questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if you've got a question, you're welcome to raise your hand or throw it in the chat, whatever you feel most comfortable with. We got about 16 minutes, but I know it's going to go by just like that. Is anyone wondering why I'm crying? That's a good question. Usually when I have these cough attacks, perfectly timed when I'm doing presentations, of course, I cry, not because I'm sad, but because I'm coughing. Excuse me. Oh, I love this question. Amal. Oh, great question. Was there a time you couldn't show compassion because a person was hard to deal with, but they needed someone? Yes, for sure. For sure. Um, well, believe it or not, it's an interesting situation, but some people are really difficult to deal with. Some people are really difficult. One of the things I was talking to somebody about this today is to recognize when people are open. When people are open, when they're receptive to your care, then you can be helpful. When people are not open and they're not receptive, it makes showing compassion very difficult. So I wasn't able to show compassion in the way that I wanted to. One of the ways that I showed compassion in that situation, again, so I guess I did show compassion, but the person might not have experienced it as compassion. Um, there's a few ways. One, I was respectful to the person. Even though the person wasn't open to the way that I wanted to help them, excuse me, I still treated them respectfully. I still honored their existence with dignity. And I think that's a form of compassion, right? Respect. I gave them opportunities to meet, to talk. But if people aren't prepared to listen, then it's not going to go very far. That said, That doesn't mean that I can't pray for them. I'm a person of faith and I believe in praying for people. That is an action that I can take. That's a course of action I can take. Believe it or not, setting up boundaries is also compassionate because if somebody is in a cycle of hurting other people and not taking responsibility for themselves, if you allow them to hurt you, that's just another experience of doing the same thing. If you stay in relationship with people sometimes when they are proving themselves as not ready for relationship or not safe to be in relationship, you're actually helping them to continue doing what they're doing. Sometimes saying, you know what? No, we're not going to continue going down this road. When you demonstrate the ability to be safe, when you demonstrate the ability to be open, to be humble, to be respectful, then we can try this again. That is actually compassionate. A lot of people would not see it that way. A lot of people think compassion is always just being warm and fuzzy. Sometimes being firm and clear with an opportunity for reconciliation, that can be a wonderful act of compassion. It's a great question. Really, really good question. One of the things that people confuse quite often is forgiveness. They think that forgiveness and reconciliation are the same thing. They're not. They're not. So the art of a genuine apology serves as a bridge from forgiveness to reconciliation, but they're not the same thing. I can forgive someone and them not be ready for reconciliation. Just because somebody desires reconciliation doesn't mean that they're ready for it. People can say a lot of things like, I'm sorry, but they haven't read the book, so they don't know all the parts and pieces that come along with a genuine apology. They don't understand that unless they understand themselves, unless they can see what moves them to do what they do, unless they take responsibility, unless they initiate a journey of change that is more than just words, unless they know these are the signs, unless they're prepared to say, these are the signs that you will see moving forward. This will be evidence. Unless they're prepared to do that, they're not ready for reconciliation. They might sincerely desire it, but they're not ready. So it's important to differentiate those things. You can forgive and not be reconciled until that person is ready for reconciliation. And when they are, it will be obvious when you know what to look for, of course. That's why I suggest get the book, read the book, take the online course, listen to the book on Audible, right? So thank you, Amal. Amazing question. I've never had that question before. It was great. Perhaps you have another one in you. Any other questions? What about you, Saida? Any questions? You're muted there. We got another question here. Would you say that compassion fatigue exists towards oneself as well? Ooh, that's a good question. Can you be fatigued at forgiving yourself? Hmm. Well, uh, one of the things I talk about in the course is what forgiveness actually is. And forgiveness is not just saying the words, forgiveness is actually going through a process. There's a process of forgiveness. So just because you give yourself another chance doesn't necessarily mean you have forgiven. So I outlined 7 phases to forgiveness, similar to a grieving process where there are several phases that we go in and we maybe go out of, we circle in and about and around and about. There are 7 phases to forgiveness. And I will skip a number of the phases, but jump to the deepest phase, which is phase 5, which is awareness. When we forgive ourselves, it's important for us to realize that where there is hurt or there's pain, there's loss. Quite often, we do the things that we do because we've experienced some sort of hurt that has caused us to think that this is okay to do, especially if you're doing this thing over and over and over. So many people find themselves in cycles and they're doing things that they don't want to be doing. They wish they didn't do it and they don't understand, like, why do I find myself here again? It's because they haven't really understood the contributing factors. What happens, not only happened, but what happens that causes them to do what they do? Whenever there are these patterns, there's usually hurt, unaddressed trauma, if you will. And when you start to unpack that, then you start to realize, oh, that's why I do that. Sometimes we think we're crazy because we do things over and over and over, but it only seems crazy because we don't understand. There is logic to what we do. It might look like it makes no sense, but when you understand it, then you'll be like, oh, get it. And that kind of understanding leads to change. So when we don't have that kind of understanding, sure, we can get upset with ourselves and get tired of forgiving ourselves, but we haven't really fully understood ourselves. When we do fully understand it, we experience change, then we move on differently in life. I really believe that. So, really, really great question. I love that question. Again, never been asked that question. Great. We have another question. Is there a way to bridge compassion and logic in terms of making a difficult decision that may affect someone else or yourself? Compassion or logic? Yes, certainly. I think anytime we make decisions, it's a good opportunity to consider the pros and the cons, counting the cost. It is logical, right? The way I see it and explain it to people, um, there are people and situations where, let's take, for example, the value of forgiveness, which again is an act of compassion sometimes. When we automatically forgive and we don't count the cost, we forgive by default, or we put ourselves at risk by default, right? We keep helping, we keep helping, we keep helping when the person is not ready for the help. They're not ready to make use of the help. They're just taking advantage of you. There's a difference between that default position and a choice. Okay. One is an informed choice, and the other is an automatic choice. You haven't really thought it through. This is like sacrifice when it's informed. And this side, this is torture. You might be making a choice on the surface, but deep down, you're not making an informed choice. It's like somebody's doing something to you. You are that somebody doing something to yourself, but you haven't counted the cost to say, you know what? I know this is going to cost me this, but I'm going to pay that price. It's worth it. I'm choosing that. So acts of compassion can be automatic, that you don't have to think through them. They can be reactionary, reflex, but they can also be very intentional. And I think that's the healthier way to be, healthier way to live. Really great question. So, how can we show compassion non-verbally? Yeah, that's a great question. Well, facial expression is powerful. Really, really powerful. Someone said showing compassion, comforting someone, a hand on the shoulder, right? Helping someone up, buying someone a card, right? Lots of things. Carrying a weight for them, helping them, watching their kids sometimes, letting them take a nap, doing their dishes for them. There are lots of things that we can do to show compassion, standing up for them, right? If they're being bullied, lots of things that we can do. We can just hang out with them. We can spend time with them, right? Not leaving people isolated, just being with somebody. There are lots of ways, right, to show compassion non-verbally. Sending them a text, right? An emoji, a song, right? Lots of ways. Really, really good question. Really good question. It is now 6:29, so I'm gonna turn things over. If you want to connect, you can either let's say you to know or info@coachdrew.ca is the way to find me. Uh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. You're so welcome. My pleasure. What great questions. Thank you guys so much.
Hurry up, stop. All right, this was a fantastic presentation, Dr. Blanco. There was amazing questions. I'm so happy that everybody got to interact with us today, and give us some eye-opening experiences. Um, if you guys want to join our many other workshops starting next year, this is our last one for this year, which it's kind of bittersweet moment, because we're at the end, but also we're restarting next year. So hopefully you guys can all join us next year on some other amazing topics where you guys can come and grab some knowledge and some insight from Dr. Blackwood. So we're gonna do a live raffle today. So we have everybody's names in this little cup here, so we can pick one out and see who won the incentive for tonight. So the winner is Aliyah Muhammad. So Aliyah Muhammad, please leave your email in the comments down below so we can reach out to you and see how you can receive your incentive. But have a nice evening, everybody, and thank you once again for joining.